After the break, I'll meet the man who believes the solution to our energy needs lies not in solar, nuclear, or wind turbines, but in highly controlled, man-made tornadoes. My quest to hack a tornado for power has led me to one of the most energy-conscious countries in the world, Switzerland. I'm going to track down the engineer Slobodan Tepic. He has an idea for creating an artificial tornado that could be used to tap into a virtually bottomless supply of energy.
My hope is that we can provide clean energy for about 500,000 people.
Wow. His idea would work like this. A high-powered microwave beam anchored in the base of this shell-like wind guide would create the warm updraft needed to trigger a vortex. The walls in the wind guide funnel the fast-moving winds through 64 high-performance turbines that harness the energy and distribute it into the grid, like a typical power plant. To demonstrate how microwaves could be used to create a tornado-generating updraft, Slobodan turned to his laser-equipped water tank.
The beam comes through the center and actually monitor the vortex being generated.
On this small scale, the heat transfer can't be seen with the naked eye. But if the upper plate, which represents the upper atmosphere, shows an increase in temperature, then there's hope for a microwave-induced tornado on a larger scale. And in just a few minutes, we can already start to see results. So this 0.3 reading that I'm seeing here at the top plate reflects...
The upper plate is being warmed by the laser beam.
Successfully heating the upper plate with the laser beam offers hope that someday we might be able to induce a tornado-like column of wind and harness its energy. But if it could be done, how big would a life-size tornado power plant have to be to meet the energy needs of 500,000 people?
I guess somewhere on the order of 600 meters in diameter.
So 600 meters, that's like more than a third of a mile across then.
About that, right.
It's going to be a while before we can hope to power a small city with artificial tornadoes, and maybe even longer before we can dismantle the naturally occurring ones that routinely blaze a path of destruction across the United States. But the science behind some of these fledgling ideas seems solid, so it's not out of the question that tornadoes might one day be hacked. Until we're...
Okay, well, you just heard it from Dr. Slobodan Tepic and on the Weather Channel. That's now the third time. 3 different sets of professionals that are explaining how it's done, the science behind it, and proving that it can be done in laboratory experiments. Which leads us to our next portion. We're going to have to go listen to them yet once again and hear what else they have to say. Now this next portion, they do kind of dive into me a little bit personally, just be prepared for that, and we'll be able to blaze through that pretty quick, ad hominem attack. And we'll get into the science of what we're talking about here. But you've got to hear it straight from them.
But what is there such a thing as a microwave pulse? Does this terminology exist?
Hello?
Yeah, Professor, can you still hear me? Yeah, what is a microwave pulse? Does this actually exist?
Does this actually?
A microwave pulse, does it exist?
Yes.
Is it real that there is such a thing as a microwave pulse? Whether or not it can affect weather or not.
It's part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We see it as visible light.
Okay.
The colors, the colors that we see, that's part of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Okay.
The shorter wavelengths or the higher frequencies are along the wavelengths that generate the X-rays, the gamma rays, and then in the longer wavelengths we have microwave. And those waves are quite long wavelengths, and they are used for transmission of for communication and also for radar transmission.
All right,
So
because
it can be used for good purposes.
Okay.
And I see no relation as of the moment yet. There's no very solid demonstration of its relation with how it can generate cyclones, how it can make the water evaporate, accumulate in a particular area, and it's just not simply well documented in his Google video.
All right. There was a portion in the video he was showing that around that area near Guam, most of it is orange, and then for a brief moment it flickers into yellow, and that's what he's trying to describe as that was the pulse, and that's what made this storm, you know, go bigger or finally form into a storm that is supposed to form. What could have caused that discoloration if he's saying it was a
There are
microwave
many coincidences that we find in nature. So there was one that he presented, and he just made this, what do you call this, click that corresponds to the microwave.
Okay.
Anybody can do that.
Right.
You don't prove something through your golden voice or the way you speak it out or present it. And what he was doing was he was trying to name drop the Stanford University to boost his argument.
But he's not even using his real name to begin with. All right, he's not even using his real name to begin with to identify himself.
Did he identify himself?
I don't think so. From what I heard, I haven't read through his blog though. We'll see. But
wow, really? Golden voice, claiming I'm trying to name drop on Stanford. Really? That is getting to the point where we're talking ad hominem attack. We can just glaze over that by saying, I am not name dropping Stanford. Stanford is just one of many organizations that's taking part in high frequency and low frequency experiments. For instance, one we're looking at here, the one-hop buoy experiment, where a buoy was placed off the coast of New Zealand to pick up the high-frequency transmission from HAARP in Alaska, has what's called a conjugate point, a corresponding point on the southern pole, magnetically speaking, where if they put out a high-frequency pulse, it goes from Alaska up into the upper ionosphere and atmosphere, cross-modulates into ELF, VLF, very low frequency, and then when it gets down here back to the surface of the Earth on the South Pole, it cross-modulates naturally into high frequency again, and then the Earth bounces that back and forth in a band, so to speak, that they can pump full of electromagnetic frequency, and they can put a huge amount of electromagnetism into a magnetic band, so to speak, that goes from north to south pole, and it bounces back and forth for up to 3 to 4 days. When that happens, there's a modulation effect that happens and a resonance. Now, Stanford is just, like I said, one of many. We've got Leicester University, you've got Harvard, you've got Alaska EDU, just several colleges, institutions involved with every project that's going on. Now, one other thing he brings up is, again, at the start of this, he says that high frequency can't lead to earthquakes. Well, there's physics studies on the propagation of earthquakes through ELF, through modulated high-frequency heating. So we're talking about heating an area with plasma with high frequency, just like your microwave in your kitchen, only over a much larger area and much more powerful, much more focused, much more high-tech in the way they target these microwave frequencies. The stations that I showed in the video, again, you guys should go watch the original video, which we'll get to in a second here, and the confirmed forecasts that have happened, the other events that led up to this. But first, I want you guys to watch a video that I put out back at the start of 2013. And this is something I would encourage the doctor to watch. And if you guys haven't seen it before, you need to watch it. Where the U.S. Navy did the experiments. This is proved. You can watch the video. We're going to play that now. Then we'll get into the prior examples. We'll start with the most current typhoon, Typhoon Haiyan. And then we'll go back through Francisco, Witwa, Crosa, Lekema. These are all the most recent ones. If we have time, we can even jump into Sandy, Chantal, Irene, and this is here in the States last year, all influenced by high pulses, high-frequency microwave pulses. Between high frequency and microwave. There's no way to know. Now, one other thing that he says before we get into this, he says it's natural. That's the most crazy thing of all. He says it's natural. So we're going to prove, watching this U.S. Navy video, that it can be done. Again, one more time, we're going to prove it can be done with the scientific experiments Then we're going to get into the prior examples. I think that pretty much settles it. Then we'll go into the last portion of their little video here, which is just pretty much a rip on me saying that not to believe anything that I put out. Okay, so let's get into it. Without further ado, here I am back at the start of 2013 announcing a discovery made through HAARP in the U.S. Navy, generating plasma in the atmosphere. Cheers, folks. Hey everybody, Dutchsince here. 4:50 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, February 27th, 2013. And I've got you over here on my website. I want to go ahead and give a big shout out to Tattoot1009 for letting me know about this yesterday. This is breaking news regarding HAARP up in Alaska and a discovery, a release discovery that was made by the Naval Research Laboratories released 2 days ago now. So let me just go ahead and take you through this here really quick so you can understand the significance of what I'm getting ready to read you. Now, for the last 2 years, I've been under severe criticism from multiple critics about what I've called HAARP rings, and these are really radar pulses in the high-frequency band coming from ground-based stations. That's why I named them HAARP rings. But radar pulse rings, HAARP rings, and I've got a huge list of all the documented HAARP rings that I've documented and other people have, and I'll put a link down below to this so you guys can scroll through and see past examples of what we're talking about here. But for the longest time, people said it could not be done. Radio frequency could not be used to generate any kind of plasma in the atmosphere or in the ionosphere, and that it was solely for research purposes. Well, the U.S. Naval Labs have basically admitted, as of yesterday, that they were able to generate a multiple kilometer wide plasma bubble and sustain it for over an hour using 1.44 megahertz to 4.34 megahertz. And they give the resonance, they give the frequency. Now, this is important because NEXRAD radar, let me take you back over here. NEXRAD radar, my original observation was that high-frequency pulses were being emitted from ground-based radars, which were having a weather effect, a heating effect around the area. And people said it couldn't be done. Well, it turns out NEXRAD pulses from 0 to 12.4 megahertz, anywhere in between 0 and 12.4 megahertz. Now, we're talking here 0 to 4.34 megahertz, so it falls within the spectrum, the pulse frequency. This is proved. Here it is. The U.S. Naval Research Labs have done it, and they did it using the billion-watt facility up at HAARP. Now, that's over a very large area. This is generated very high up in the atmosphere. Now, what we're seeing here with radar works at about 750,000 watts after it goes through the klystron tubes, 750,000 peak watts. And so we're looking at smaller versions of the same facility. And they talk about it, the circular appearance of what appears here, and they even are able to image it on their radar, which is slightly different than the weather radar that we see standard civilian-wise. I urge you guys to come over and read this whole article. If you have previously thought that this was impossible, or if you're a skeptic that said it couldn't be done, you definitely need to read this and understand that they just announced a day ago that they did it using HAARP in conjunction with observations through radar. So you can see HAARP on radar. That's something else that I want to take you guys through really quick. I'm going to take you over to my other HAARP post. This has been up since April, and I've added to it continuously with more information as it's become available. So we've got TV shows talking about it. We have different facility locations talking about it. Let me take you down to the bottom of the post here where I've added the most recent information. And the other discovery that we made a month ago now is that radar devices are used as quote-unquote heaters. And they're doing it over the North Pole, for instance, from a place called SPEAR, S-P-E-A-R. And they're able to project a radar frequency. Here's a diagram from their site showing super darn radar at the peripherals. Then you've got your SPEAR radar at the center pointing up to a spot where they cause massive heating. We're talking upwards of 5,000 to 8,000 degrees they're able to generate. From that, they also have found that radar itself, when it goes up and disturbs the ionosphere, gives its own resonant signal that appears in the shape of a circle. Okay, and they show it here. Here's a diagram here. So I urge you folks, please, if you're skeptical on this, go read through